Welcome back. As part of the tool post project that I'm doing, we're going to paint the pieces and parts, or I'm going to paint the pieces and parts that I have, that I've built. Now everything that I've done for the most part is raw steel. I cleaned the mill scale off of most of the parts as best as I could. I'm not a welder. I'm not really a very good mechanic. I'm not a machinist. I'm not a very good carpenter, but what I am is a painter. That was my career. I painted cars for probably close to 30 years. So I am an expert on this. So what I have here is the first tool post insert that I made over the other day. I'm not sure whether or not it's probably part of the tool post building video. Now this is the insert that goes inside the tool post. I bead blasted this the other day before I started working on it because I wanted a nice clean surface to weld on, and I wanted to see how my welder was working. So there's a couple things with this that are pretty interesting. One is this piece of 3/8 inch plate is actually, or strapping, is actually bent from the heat. I don't care. This it's a tool post. If this was an important piece, I would take it to the shop. I don't have a shop press here. I would take it to the shop and I would put it in the press and I'd bend it flat again. But that's neither here nor there. What I want to show is, and it's kind of really important, is when you bead blast something, you remove all of the protective coating, the mill scale, E-coat if it's an automobile. When we get into blasting automobiles. So let me get up a little bit closer here and I'm going to show what I'm talking about. Now there's two different surfaces here. Hopefully this will show up. Hopefully this will show up good on the video, because this is a great explanation or a great show or a great example. So this side here is got what's called flash rust on it. Now this happens whenever you bead blast something and you touch it. The humidity is high. The humidity's been high here for a couple days. Actually, I probably shouldn't be painting in here at all, but I've been running the air conditioner and fans all night to try to negate some of the humidity in here. This building is an old stone building and it's always damp inside. Everything I have gets a dusting of WD-40. Oh, don't use WD-40. You know what? It works great. I've been using it for years. I've stripped cars with it. I've stripped cars completely down to bare metal, wiped them with WD-40, and they didn't rust for months. You wash it off with brake clean or naphtha, what have you. WD-40 is fish oil and paraffin and a little bit of naphtha. And it washes right off. You can't paint right over it, but it washes off much better than any other product. You don't want to use silicone, you want to anything like that. WD-40 contains no silicone. I actually watched a guy one day paint over top of WD-40. It's a pretty decent solvent. So what we have here is we have flash rust and then freshly bead blasted. I'm going to bead blast the other half of this, and then I'll show what it's going to look like right before I paint it. And then I'll talk about the paint that I'm going to use, and why I'm using that paint, and how to properly apply it. Okay? Well, fresh out of the bead blaster, I'm using kind of a mix in my blaster because it's a pain in the ass to change over, but I had used up all the other media. Long story short, this is aluminum oxide that I'm blasting with, which is a pretty aggressive abrasive. I was doing a lot of heavy, nasty, rusty stuff, so I just put that in there. I do have glass, but this doesn't need glass. You need to get glass for aluminum and brass and stuff like that. Aluminum oxide for bare steel is perfectly fine, especially if you're blasting mill scale, and I'm going to show you some mill scale. This is the tool post holder, or this is the tool post or the holder for my big grinder. This has mill scale on it. I wasn't gonna blast it, but I got the blaster out and I figured, what the hell? No, I didn't get it out. It's always there. So you can see here, where I ground the mill scale off of the post here, I actually didn't grind it off here, but oh well. You can't paint over mill scale. Oh, you can paint over mill scale. No, you can't. You got to get rid of the mill scale. Now you can grind it off, you can sand it off. My preference is to blast it off. You can use a shot blaster, you can use a bead blaster, you can use anything to blast it off. You've got to remove it. My recommendation though is to use the finest abrasive media that you can to avoid having to sand it after you're done. I used to do a lot of heavy blasting. The sandblaster that I used to use literally was like a 500-pound sandblaster, if not more, and it was huge. It took a big rotary compressor to run it. But we also used very large aggregate. All blasting media has a rating. Don't use play sand. Do yourself a favor. Don't use play sand. Spend the extra money. Buy graded blasting media if you're using sand. If you're not using sand, if you're using garnet, if you're using aluminum oxide, if you're using glass, they all come graded anyway. It's usually by the grit size. The higher the number, the smaller the grit. My blasting cabinet right now, I'm using 80 grit aluminum oxide. With a little bit of walnut shell mixed in. It's a turd. So I'm going to get back at that. I'm going to blast the rest of the mill scale off that. The other thing is this has cutting oil on it, which I'm going to wash off with some lacquer thinner. You can use lacquer thinner, naphtha, tetrahydrochloride, brake clean, anything, but you got to get it clean. You can't put anything oily or wet inside your blasting cabinet. Just a quick thing. This is one of my pet peeves. I've got thousands of pet peeves, but this is probably my #1 pet peeve. You'll notice I'm folding these towels. I'm folding them in fourths for a reason. This way you have 4 clean sides. If you just take it, ball it up and wipe it, well, you've wasted the whole rag. The other thing, a brief second on rags. My preference is to use a product called Scott White Balls. They're almost the consistency of, I forget what the actual part number is, but they're almost the consistency of a washcloth. You use them for real high-end wiping operations or where things absolutely need to be clean and totally lint-free. You can, but they're really expensive. I think they're like 50 cents a piece. And you know, you're using them once and throwing them away. I'm painting a tool post. I'm not painting a Ferrari or a Maserati or a Bentley or whatever. This is, this is a tool post. So these rags here, and it's another funny thing. These are rags in a box that you get from, I think I got these from Home Depot. Now they're cute because I don't have the other ones. If you buy them other places, so I've bought rags in a box from 3 different suppliers, and 3 different times I got different rags. The ones from Home Depot are not as good as the ones as I've gotten from Costco or from my parts house, my regular parts supplier. You also notice that these are white. For general shop use, I will use these blue ones, and these are shop rags. The biggest problem with these, well, there's a couple problems with these. One is they have a tendency to disintegrate with solvent. They just fall apart. Now I am using, this is a pretty rough surface for painting in general. And actually I should probably get a blowgun and blow this stuff off before I even start. Let's grab a blowgun real quick. I also have real quick, you'll see behind me there's a drape here. I use this drape as part of my impromptu paint booth. I didn't set the whole paint booth up because I got too much shit in here now to actually set up my full paint booth. But I've got plastic curtains that I can drop down all around where my painting area is, and I have fans that'll extract the fumes. That is to prevent overspray from going all over the inside of my shop. That is not to keep dust or dirt out of the paint. That is done through proper preparation and proper maintaining of your equipment and yourself. But I'm just going to blow these off real quick. Shit, you know what? Well, you know what? So I just real lightly blew that off. Now there is a little tiny bit of mill scale on. This is lacquer thinner. I should be using wax and grease remover, naphtha. So just, that's after it's been blown off. See it, the surface is so rough after being blasted that it's really rough on these rags. It's also, these, even though these are the good ones, they are leaving lint on it because they're so rough. The other thing is lacquer thinner eats these. It'll tear these up. It'll also tear these gloves up. Within seconds, these gloves are going to be junk. But I just wanted to show, so I blew that off real quick. I'm going to flip this over. Now, I didn't blow this side off. And let's see, I'll get a clean rag. Now, like I said, I blew the other side off. I didn't blow this side off. You can see the difference. Just by a quick blow, we'll clean off an incredible amount of dirt. It blows off a lot of dirt, so you should, there we go. So there's no blow, blow. And that's not a camera trick, it's just the way it is. High pressure air is a wonderful, yet dangerous thing. You can really hurt yourself with it, hurt your ears, what have you. So I'm just wiping these off. To get the dirt off, not to get wax or grease or silicone off. Silicone is absolutely 100% verboten anywhere around me forever. And a lot of things contain silicone that you don't realize. The number one thing that contains silicone is spray lubricants. And spray on waxes, tire dressing, things of that nature. You bring that in the paint shop, you bring that around me, yeah, you're gonna get a bloody stump for a hand and I'm gonna throw your shit away. I have had countless paint jobs ruined with silicone. Silicone is silicone is some evil, evil, evil shit. Now you could use cloth rags for this, and actually because this finish is so rough, I probably should have used cloth rags, but I don't really have any real clean ones right now. And if you're going to use cloth rags, my suggestion is old t-shirts, okay? But you're going to have to take off any of this stuff. So you want to cut this shit out before you use an old t-shirt as a shop rag. I don't know if I can... Maybe it'll show up on here. I don't know if we can see it. I can see it clear as day. Yeah, there you go. See this here? That's lint from the rag, okay? And that's a problem. Now I'm gonna fix that problem. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a tack rag. So tack rags. I don't buy cheap, shitty tack rags. I forget what they're called. I think crystals or whatever. They use beeswax. Don't buy the cheap ones. If you go to a place that has tack rags, your painting supply house, they'll have a couple different styles. They'll have a couple different ones. Don't buy the cheap ones. Okay, just don't. I mean, you can argue with me. I don't give a shit. I'm used to it. I spent years arguing with an asshole about it. That very subject I argued with somebody about. So I only buy good tack rags. Now these are DuPont, I don't know, I want to say Sonera? Yeah, whatever. But these are good ones. And they're blue. Most of the good ones are not white. The white cheesecloth ones, they're shit. They're total shit. If you're doing wood, if you're doing something that's fine. If you're using a natural product over it, it's fine. If you're using shellac, if you're using nitrocellulose lacquer, you can use one of those tack rags if you want. If you are going to use one of those tack rags, I highly, here you go, baby. I highly recommend that you completely unfold it. And you should do this with any tack rag that you get. Is you want to unfold it and you want to kind of shake it out a little bit. And those really cheap ones, I will find something dirty in the shop to knock some of the sticky off of them. These tack rags are not sticky. They're also 100% lint free. I thought you were holding that bag for me. She doesn't want to hold the bag anymore. And when you're done with it, you put it in a Ziploc bag or you put it back in the bag that you came with. Some of the good ones come already in a Ziploc bag. They can be reused. You don't have to use a new one every time. As a matter of fact, a used tack rag is actually usually a little bit better because it doesn't leave any residue. These blue ones, they don't leave any residue. I even was at a point where I was buying disposable ones. You pulled them out of a box like a tissue and you used it once and you threw it right in the trash. These were a little bit more expensive and they work great. So that's just a brief thing on tack rags. And I'm going to use this tack rag right now on that piece of material to get the lint created by the other rag off of it before I put primer on it. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit of primer. You get down. Oh, you dropped my bag. Okay. I'm going to give it a quick blow. I should mention also that I am running 4 different air water separators in my system, including a desiccant filtration system. And I still get water in my airlines. Today is really humid. And I probably shouldn't be painting at all, but I am. My shop's really dirty too. I'm not painting, like I said, I'm not painting a Bentley, I'm painting some tool posts. So I'm just gonna wipe it off real quick with a tack rag. Blowing it off is actually pretty sufficient. I even have some anti-static blow equipment, which actually worked pretty good until whatever was in it quit working. I think it whatever created the ozone or the anti-static finally died. So I'm just wiping these off real quick with a tack rag. What I should do, this particular rack here has so much overspray on it that it's not really great to paint on, but doesn't matter. Doesn't really matter because it's a tool post. If this was something important that I was painting, I would actually wrap this in parchment paper. Or I wouldn't use this at all. But because it's a tool post, because I'm shooting a video, I would actually prefer to hang these. But like I said, my shop is not set up for painting right now. Serious painting. It's set up for painting tool posts. Let me see here. Oh, there's my bag. There's the tack rag. There's the bag. And there's a little phlegm for it. Now, a brief bit on primer and paint. Now, I have, once again, like I said, I am an expert painter. Okay, I went to school for it and everything. Now, there's a couple things. Well, first of all, obviously, if I'm an expert painter, why am I using a spray can? Well, I'm using a spray can for a couple reasons. The biggest reason is I don't feel like going to my jobber and purchasing the correct product in my mind. And it's a tool post, okay? And this stuff works just fine. It's not going to be exposed to the weather. It's not going to be overly abused. If this tool post was going to be used outside somewhere, then I would absolutely go to my jobber. I would buy all the stuff I needed to do this job correctly, and that's the products that I would use. But today, because today I'm using these. I've had excellent luck with both of these products. Well, I've had excellent luck with this product, and many different variations of it. And then the most important thing to gather from this is this acid etching or self etching. Okay, you can't paint over bare metal without using acid etching primer. You can. You know, you can go buy a can of this shit. You can go buy a can of this and you can prime it. You can spray it on there. But the chances of it peeling are very, very, very high unless you're painting over, actually, ironically, a bead blasted surface. This only has what's called mechanical adhesion. That's all it relies on to make sure that it stays where it's supposed to be. Acid etching primer or self-etching primer has both mechanical and chemical adhesion to the material in which you're applying it to. So no matter what you do, you really should put a minimum of a dust coat of this type of primer on any bare metal surface. Be it, it doesn't work great on galvanized. That's a whole different animal to paint. But any bare steel, bare aluminum, you have to absolutely put it on bare aluminum, bare steel, cast iron, whatever. You want to absolutely use an acid etching primer. This, then after this dries thoroughly, you will then apply this. I'm not applying this today. I'm only going to put this on. The viscosity of this product is very thin, and it only requires a dusting to help with adhesion to the product that you're using, or the product, whatever it is that you're material that you're spraying. Now the other thing with this product is I highly, highly, highly recommend wearing some form or another of actual respirator. I just mentioned that if you're spraying this, any paint, but if you're spraying this stuff, okay, the use of proper breathing equipment is really important. This stuff has acid in it. Now this isn't as bad as some of the zinc chromates that I've used over the years, which actually require the addition of a hardener or an acid product, or acid to the paint before you use it, which acts as a hardener and as the catalyst to make it work right. And we're not doing that today. We're using a spray bomb. This dries by air. This is a non-cross-linked product. You can buy stuff like this in cans where you crack the top and then you shake it up and spray it, but you got to use the whole can. This stuff works fine, trust me. So there's a couple different types of respirators out there. This is not a respirator, okay? This is for drywall dust. Yeah, this is for drywall dust, even though it might be rated a little bit higher. All respirators, all breathing equipment has a NIOSH rating, and it'll tell you exactly what it's used for. This is not for painting. Maybe latex with a roller, you could use this. But yeah, or protect Asians from whatever breathing shit they got going on in China. I understand the irony of me smoking while I'm talking about your lungs. The other option, and these are the ones that actually I highly suggest if you're a hobbyist. These are made by 3M. They're disposable paint respirators. I'm not going to get into fitting a respirator. It's just not, I'm just not qualified to talk about that. You go to 3M's website, you go to SAS, they'll explain to you how to properly fit a respirator. The first most important thing is you gotta shave. So these, this one comes with the organic filter is already pre-attached. You use them. I think the useful period for these is 24 operating hours. When you're done with it, you put it in a Ziploc bag, suck all the air out of the Ziploc bag, zip it shut. You'll get some extra time out of it. These are about $15 a piece. If you're spraying paint, you really should buy one of these. Now, when I was working daily as a professional, I actually had one of these. Now this is manufactured by SAS. Oh, there's these tack rags. These are the dirty tack rags that I save for projects like this. Notice it's in its bag that it came with. This is actually, oh shit, you know what? This is a disposable too. Damn. And this is actually, I think, the last one I bought before I left the shop. Okay, so I like the SAS ones. They fit I have a funny shaped face and a big nose. And what happens with the 3M ones is I get intrusion in around my nose. The SAS ones don't do that. So I was going to explain exactly how they work. I was going to use the cartridge ones. I think I threw the cartridge away. What happens is, and you can see the headgear just starts to shit the bed after a while. Throw it away. The good ones with the replaceable cartridges, which if you're doing it for a living is really what you should buy. I'm a hobbyist now, so this one was actually expensive. I think this was like $25 maybe, give or take a little bit. My other one was $50, and it didn't even come with cartridge. Well, it came with one set of cartridges. The cartridges are expensive to replace. So these are, if I can get this apart, these come with two different filters. They come with, they come with a pre-filter, and this pre-filter is shot. I actually would run them until you can't read the outside anymore, but you can tell this one's shot because, I don't know if it'll show up on camera, it's pink. Pink is bad. It's junk. It also comes with an activated carbon filter. There's another pre-filter, and then there's activated carbon inside of there. That's actually what filters out the VOCs. And tear gas. It doesn't help your eyes, but it does. So that's just my brief little bit on the respirators. You can look, there's plenty of other videos on respirators, but if you're gonna spray that shit, you gotta wear a respirator. So just real quick. Yeah, this one. So whenever you're using a respirator, you want to do what's called a positive air pressure check. And you just put your hand over where it comes out and just blow. You can hear, I don't know if you can hear it on this one. I've got air coming out here because this, like I said, this one's shot. The headgear's no good. That's a little bit better. I'm going to turn this fan on because I don't want to breathe this shit if I don't have to. I'm going to turn this fan on over here because I don't want to breathe this shit if I don't have to. I breathed this stuff in for 30 years. And I lay awake in bed at night wheezing. I lay awake in bed wheezing like a pug in the heat. So, you know, if you're gonna do any kind of serious spraying, if you're gonna restore your car, if you're gonna do any of that stuff, invest in a decent respirator. Another thing you'll notice is I'm wearing gloves. I really like these black ones. I'm not wearing these gloves because I'm a sissy and I don't want to get solvent on my hands. Which, the reason I bring up sissy and solvent is I was told I was a sissy because I was wearing gloves when I was using solvents. I'm wearing gloves because this is bare steel, and if you touch it with your bare hands, it will flash rust. It will rust. This stuff's already starting to rust. I've actually had it happen in the body shop, especially with older cars, like real old cars, like the 30s and 40s. You can strip them down to bare metal, and within an hour on a humid day, you'll have flash rust all over it. Earlier in the video, I showed the flash rust on this piece. That happened in 24 hours. This piece was perfectly clean yesterday. But but it flash rusted overnight. Even though I had my air conditioner ran in here all night long because I knew I was going to do this today. My air conditioner ran all night long and I had fans running all night long. I'm going to turn this fan on and I'm just going to put a quick coat on here.
I can smell that product right through this mask because this mask is not fitting properly. So I'm actually going to kind of hold my hand on it. This is some nasty shit. Now I'm going to let it air out a little bit before I take my mask off.
Oh, faces. Okay. Ow! Well, I'm back. I made a corporate decision. That I'm going to actually I'm going to throw some primer on these, some actual regular primer on these. These have been sitting for probably 3 hours after I did the initial acid etching primer coat. Acid etching primer. And I went to my local Home Depot and I picked up Rust-Oleum hammered finish, which is gray, because the monkey shit brown just wasn't going to cut it. But I also did pick up some primer, gray primer. The reason I chose the gray primer is, I don't know if it's going to show up on the video, but the acid etching primer is green. Ow! The acid etching primer is green. You want to get down? There you go. You want? All right. It's green. The primer that I bought is gray, and the Rust-Oleum HAMMERTONE is gray. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some red Scotch-Brite, rough up the surface because it's been sitting for a while, and it won't kill it to have a little bit more tooth. To have a little bit of tooth. Really? Really, Tiki? Tiki, what are you doing? So, I'm just going to Scotch-Brite this real quick. I've already done a couple of the other pieces, so I'm just going to... It's really nothing. I mean, it's purely just... You get a red Scotch-Brite, you rub it. That noise you're hearing in the background is Tiki. Tearing the shit out of a bag. So I said, it doesn't take much. As a matter of fact, you want to really just do it very, very lightly, just to knock a little of the glaze off. I am not going to flip this over. I'm not going to do anything to the back side of this particular piece because I've got another plan for that. I'm going to put some texture coating on the bottom, actually undercoating, automotive undercoating on the bottom of this piece is getting undercoated, just where it makes where it's going to make contact with the ground, which it's not ever actually going to make contact with the ground. Like I said, this isn't. Really, you just want to you really just want to kind of knock the glaze off of this. It's no big deal. That one. This is never going to see the light of day. Ironically, the most important part of this is the bottom, which isn't going to have a tool on it. But, well, you're just full of piss and vinegar, aren't you, Tiki? This. I probably shouldn't be painting these sticks or these pieces, but whatever sticks, whatever comes off comes off. The receiver tube is pretty forgiving. You have to excuse me, I'm going to turn this fan on here. Earlier in the video, when I wiped off the bare steel, I used lacquer thinner. That was fine for bare steel. That was fine for taking off the blue, the blue Sharpie that I was using for marking things. Actually, the blue it did go away after a couple coats. I still think it might pop up, but because I'm using HAMMERTONE, it won't do that. Now in this container here, I have traditional wax and grease remover. It's a SMT 300 from my paint supplier, my jobber. You can't use lacquer thinner now. This paint will come off with lacquer thinner. It won't come off with the regular traditional wax and grease remover. You could use naphtha. I prefer using the stuff that I get from my jobber. I know it's naphtha, but it's wax and grease remover. It's designed for it. You have to use it. You could use denatured alcohol, but even then I wouldn't trust it. So this is just to get the dust off. This is not paint that's coming off. This is the sanding dust. This is the sanding dust. So you wipe it on. Oh, actually, it is taking the paint off. Son of a bitch. Oh, that made me look like an ass, didn't it? I wonder if I mix these. I'm just going to give it a light wipe. Usually, I won't even, this has been sitting just a little bit too long. Usually I won't even do this. What I would do is I would spray the acid etching primer on and then immediately paint over it. But because I had to go out and I let it sit a while, I sanded it. But yeah, this is, well, there you go. That's my oopsie for the day as a professional painter. But the plus side of that is it's made it sticky again. I usually would go over the acid etching primer, what's called wet on wet. So you spray the acid etching primer on right after it flashes off. You would start to paint it or prime it with the more traditional primer, which is actually what I'm going to do right now. The other thing you can do, because we've sanded it, is to use just your nice tack rag. That'll get the sanding dust off. I blew it off. You saw me blow it off. And then you can use a tack rag to take off any other sanding residue. Sanding residue, or leftover sanding residue, or dry primer will cause adhesion issues. And if it doesn't do it now, it'll do it later. One of the tricks in the old school days was to take lacquer primer, over reduce it, spray it, and then go wet on wet, which was supposed to, I don't know, act as a sealer or something. Back in the old days when you were using purely lacquer, you could get away with shit like that. Sometimes. usually not. I did a lot of work on older restorations and, and work that had been done by other people before I got to it. And pretty much, with very few exceptions, a lot of the paint failures that I had dealt with were because somebody cut a corner somewhere else. I had plenty of jobs where I could just go up to it with a razor blade and scrape the paint off. And the reason I could scrape that paint off was because somebody skipped a step in the process. These are tool stands, so it's not a big deal. But if this was your classic 67 Nova or something, then it would become a problem. Yeah, and I don't give a shit about that tire. So I'm gonna let that flash off a little bit and we'll get back to it. Yeah, I'm not wearing my mask. This is just lacquer primer. I should probably mention that I'm using all Rust-Oleum product. Not because I want to, but because that's what Depot sells. I'm not mixing manufacturers. Rust-Oleum in particular is very line sensitive. When I was painting cars for a living, never ever 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 mix brands. So if whoever your paint supplier is, whatever paint supplier you're using, whatever manufacturer you're using, stick with their line. This is another one of those, it's not even open to debate for me. It's not even open up to argument. You can argue all you want, I'm just gonna tell you, you're a fucking jerk off. If you are using DuPont product, you use DuPont product from the beginning to the end. No questions asked. Now, that's it. They're all engineered to work together. When you start mixing stuff, you start mixing product A, or you start mixing Sherwin-Williams, Rust-Oleum, DuPont, Axo Nobel, you start mixing all that shit together, you're gonna get a failure somewhere. And when you get that failure, not if, when you get that failure, whose fault is it? Is it the primer manufacturer? Is it the paint manufacturer? Is it the sealer manufacturer? Is it you? Well, if you're mixing shit, it's you. Somewhere along the line my video shut off. So I'm gonna hand hold the camera to kind of show you what I'm doing and explain it a little bit better. Using the HAMMERTONE is it's not like spraying regular paint. Yes, everything's still very wet, but it kind of has to be. You're gonna have to deal with the fan noise. I'll just talk over it. So, I don't know where the best place to do this is gonna be. It's kind of hard to probably get shit all over my lens too. I'm right-handed. I have a choice. So right now I have basically a dust coat on the pieces or the parts, and it doesn't really look like HAMMERTONE. It just looks gray. So the initial coat of paint is just to kind of establish a base. So I guess maybe the best place to do it is right here.
It kind of looks hammer-tone. Now we're going to make it look real hammer-tone. And you can see how when I'm applying it, it's very wet, and I'm keeping the edge wet as it goes on. But as it dries, or as it starts to settle in, the HAMMERTONE appears. So HAMMERTONE is it's a minimum of 2 coats to get the proper finish. I actually like it. It's very reminiscent of old machinery. Yeah, it's very reminiscent of old machinery, which is kind of what I'm going for. It's an interesting process, or it's an interesting paint. And I will add that anything you paint with this shit, yeah, you might as well forget trying to put anything else in it or on it. I'm going to put the camera down away from the paint for a minute. I'm not really sure how well this is going to turn out on the video, but I figured I'd shoot it anyway. The best HAMMERTONE is on the flat surfaces. It looks pretty good. It's where I was able to hose it on. It's you know, nice and wet is the way you want that to go on, which is kind of counterintuitive to using a spray can. Spray cans you usually want to kind of take your time with. And there's, you kind of see it there, how it's all mottled, and it's still wet. That's the look I'm going for the most part, which is ironic because that's absolutely not the look that you want for most things. You're going to want it smooth and even, but I did not want it smooth and even. I wanted pretty much exactly what I got here. And what that does is it hides a multitude of sins. Sorry, you're going to deal with the fan. This base plate came out perfectly. Give it a minute to focus. The space plate here came out really nice. Ironically, nobody will ever see this. This will all be covered by the grinder, but that's exactly the look I was going for. And it did kind of transfer to the rest of the pieces, just not perfect. If I really wanted to fuck it up and make it look like shit, and HAMMERTONE, you would spray silicone on it, like tire dressing. Just squirt it with a little bit of tire dressing on like the 3rd coat, and it'll do that too. Don't tell me, or don't ask me why I know that. You know, this came out really good. You'll never see it, but it is what it is, and I'm pretty happy with the way they turned out.